lot of shifting between positions. So it doesn't always work to program them based on their position. You still need to program them based on their body type and their needs.
Hey there, welcome to our podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, could you please do us a solid? If you're enjoying what you hear, give us a 5-star rating and hit that subscribe button on your platform. It really helps us reach more parents, coaches, and youth in the youth athlete development scene. All right, let's get into this week's chat.
Welcome back to the In Athlete podcast. We got a special guest here today, fresh from his honeymoon, back into the world of S&C again, once again. Jay Ellis. Jay, first of all, thanks for taking your time out of your chaotic schedule.
Sure thing, mate. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Do you just want to briefly talk about who you are, a bit about yourself? Because I know you're in the basketball world at the moment. You've been in there for quite a while now, working with Melbourne United. If you just want to give the listeners just a bit of a background in terms of how you got there, first of all, and what your current role is with the team.
Yeah, no problem. I guess the common one, which will probably be familiar for most people from an educational standpoint, pretty standard. Degree. Went straight out of school, did my 3 years of sports science, had about 3 or 4 years off, did a few different things, both in and out of the strength and conditioning industry. Did my master's via Edith Cowan over in Perth. I did that across about a 4-year period, did it part-time whilst I was well entrenched with my jobs. And in amongst that, I've just done lots of different short courses and stuff. So nothing too drastic from what a majority of people would probably resonate with from an educational standpoint. From a experience standpoint, like a lot of people born and bred in Melbourne, I went through the football pathway. So my first experience was with what I think is called the Coates Talent League now, which was formerly the NAB League /TSC Cup, for those who are familiar with that. And did football for a long time, did Western Jets in that league, Vic Metro, spent some time at Collingwood, did an internship. Wasn't really fulfilled by football, so I went across to the States for a year and did a season over there with NC State in college football. Came back, had one more crack at footy, and again, didn't really find the job satisfaction that I was after working at AFL. Nothing to do with the club. Club was great. Got a lot of friends and stuff from there. I really enjoyed my time there. Just I wasn't satisfied with my career path at that point. So I was with both Casey with the VFL and Melbourne with the AFL. And I must have been a bit of bad luck for them, because as soon as I left, they won a premiership for the first time in a long time. So probably a little bit of bad luck from me once they shipped me out. And then I was lucky enough to find my feet in basketball, of which I've been with Melbourne United now for the last 5 years. That's probably most of it in a nutshell.
Yeah, and what's your current role with Melbourne United at the moment? What do you do with them on a day-to-day basis at the moment?
Yeah, so I'm part of a performance team, and where I sit in that is the head of strength and conditioning. We've got our high-performance manager, Steve, who does a fantastic job and doubles up as our physiotherapist, but largely in high performance. I'm the head of strength and conditioning, and then there's an assistant strength and conditioning coach that does a fantastic job with us, Josh Kiley. And then we usually have a assistant or intern sit around that sort of changes year upon year. Yeah,
and I want to talk about your role, and then how do you influence the current crop of players, but also who you got coming in through. How does S&C play a role in the development of the players? Whether it's we can kind of split it in terms of the kids that have just come through and then they just made the squad, to those who are veterans, been with us, been playing for 10 plus years professionally.
Yeah, good question. Distinctly different, primarily because the NBL is in a fantastic growth phase right now. Clubs are quite well resourced, and that is continuing to grow. So for a lot of the young guys coming through, and I say this between the age of, I guess, 18 to 25, 26, having structured strength and conditioning is something which they're probably used to. And that goes in hand with the sports science, the catapult, the force decks, all those sort of bits and pieces that come along with high performance sport. The older guys in the NBA, I'd say, are probably 29, 30 onwards. And a little bit different to a lot of sports. We've got guys in the league who are as old as 36, 37, 38. So the lifeline of basketball is actually quite pronounced and a little bit longer than a lot of other sports, which I think is fantastic. But for those guys, when the league was in its infancy, they actually had to source their own strength and conditioning. And accordingly, some of that was on-site, some of that was off-site, but they're very, very good at knowing what their body needs. And to be honest, they work really well independently of what, they know how to work with little resources. So when they have everything, they really great at guiding their own development. So those sorts of guys, I'm happy to work with them to sort of discuss what their needs are and largely just fulfill them where I can. Some want more assistance than others, and some are happy to just be sort of pushed in the right direction and then left their own device. And there's a level of respect there that they'll do what needs doing, but also I've got a level of respect that they know what works for their individual bodies, and that's a really important relationship to build upon. The younger guys, generally in basketball, we've got 15 guys on a roster, and any given night, we've probably set up 12 or 13 of them. 3 or 4 of them might not even see the court, which traditionally are the younger guys between the age of 18 to 22, maybe 24. So we can be a lot more aggressive with their physical development off the court purely because they're not seeing the minutes on the court, which is different to a lot of sports. Like, you can play AFL and you're in the 22 of an AFL team, you're very likely to see the field for at least 50% of the game time. To be honest, unless you're in the top 7 or 8 with a rotation, you're probably not going to see 50% of the game time on an NBL court. You might play 3 minutes here, 4 minutes there. So accordingly, the physical development is really important to keep pushing towards the obviously direction of being on the court more.
Nice. And then how do you onboard your first years as well? So they might have come through NBL 1 system, or maybe you got some sort of college guys or high school kids that have come through. How do you onboard them? How do you find out where they're actually at from a physical standpoint? And then where do you start them?
Yep. It's another great question. So Steve, our high performance manager, will do a lot of movement screens in that regard, and they're not necessarily the traditional movement screens that most people are familiar with. They're not just like, okay, we'll watch you squat, we'll watch you hinge, that sort of stuff. It's a little bit more in depth than that. So we'll go through a bit of a testing battery, which we use, which can be anything from hip rotation strength in multiple planes of movement, same with the shoulders, some single leg hop tests, some double leg calf strength tests, a variety of tests. It's quite extensive, to be honest, and that will give us a bit of a guideline for what their strengths are and also what their deficiencies are and how we can build a program out from there. They're probably not all that unique in that regard, in that general strength and general physical development, from mobility, strength, hypertrophy, speed, power, all those general qualities are quite important still, and that's not different to what a lot of other people would experience. But one thing with basketballs is they have very unique body types and very unique anthropometrics, and a lot of the onboarding process is watching them in the gym and sort of figuring out the right alternative, because not every a straight barbell deadlift won't suit a lot of them, and a barbell back squat won't suit a lot of them, and these sorts of things. So it's sort of watching them lift and figuring out what the right approach is. Lots of machines can sort of help with that, but our onboarding process is pretty quantitative through the measurements of strength in hips, knees, ankles, shoulders. But then it's a bit more qualitative with going, okay, like, how do we make sure we get the right program for the right athlete and not just try and force a square peg into a round hole? Because there's so many different body types we come across between 75 kilos and 6 foot tall, and then you got guys who are 7'2" and 115. So we've got to be really mindful that they are very unique athletes in their own right, and we have to treat them that way.
Yeah, and then I guess probably the easiest way, because I know AFL have different sized bodies and whatnot, and NBL is no different. So your guards build is going to be completely different to your power forwards and your centers as well. So I guess what are some of like the key obvious differences when it comes to the programming side between the guards and the centers and the forwards?
Yeah, good question. One of the things I often sort of joke about with the basketballs I coach is, if you get to the age of 21 playing basketball and you have healthy hips, so healthy knees and healthy ankles, you've probably been on the bench a hell of a lot. There is just an attrition rate that comes with playing basketball, and there will be some sort of dysfunction, injury history, whatever you want to call it. Primarily knees and ankles we see a lot. Could be Osgood slatters, could be severs, lots of rolled ankles, could be, patellar tendinopathies, all those sorts of common things they're commonplace in our environment. And then it's going, okay, well, how do we make sure we, A, minimize the chance of that happening again, and then B, put the right program in place. So I've sort of made the mistake early in my career that I did go by position, and I was sort of trying to do programs for guards, programs for wings, programs for bigs, and it's something I've gone away from, purely because even within that within that sort of group of athletes, you've got distinctly different body types, distinctly different ages, distinctly different backgrounds, and even goals too. Like you can have some guys who pride themselves on being a big, who was if you look around the NBA, you get someone like, say, Joel Embiid, who's a big, strong-bodied, big, and speed and agility is not necessarily their asset. Their asset is being strong, stable base, and hard to move in a screen, and also hard to get around. Then you've got guys in the league who are a bit more athletic, like Wemby's obviously the obvious one right now, but Chet Holmgren's also a center, and he's a long, skinny dude, and the asset that they have is very different to someone who's a big, thick-bodied center. So I think you can run into a bit of problem when you sort of go, oh, well, they're a center, we'll program them as a center. Within reason, we really try to program as an individual, but sort of work around what their body gives us is probably the easy way I would put that. So some guys have the ability to take on a lot more load in the gym initially because they've had healthy bodies. Some guys need to be built from the ground up, and you can sort of find anywhere on the spectrum that can sort of be the case. Combined with the fact that oftentimes with basketball, it's not uncommon for have someone to play a 4 or a 5, or it's like a power forward center, or point guard, shooting guard, small forward. There's a lot of shifting between positions, so it doesn't always work to program them based on their position. You sort of need to program them based on their body type and their needs.
Cool. And then what does the schedule look like, for in season, off season? I know you've been off season for a little while now, and then you're slowly ramping things up into preseason. What does the schedule look like for the guys? What are your key focuses throughout those different seasons?
Yep. The simple, boring answer is my focus is always strength. What strength entails, to be a bit more specific than that, is, are they strong in multiple planes of motions? Are they strong single leg? Are they strong double leg? Are they strong with all their basic lifting patterns? And then sort of go, okay, how do we build out on that? I think that's one thing that when we look at identifying and describing what strength is, again, it can be very different for very different people. Like, you can have people who are very strong doing Pilates or very strong doing yoga, but they're not strong doing a back squat. You can have some people who are very strong with holding their body types on the court because they can position their body quite well, but they're not necessarily strong in the gym, and vice versa. I've seen guys who are incredibly strong in the gym and they struggle to utilize that strength on the court. So largely when we sort of try and boil it all back down, strength is the constant. And then within that, there's different times you have different focuses. So the development players, because they play a lot of NBL 1, they play quite big minutes in the off season. Right now, it's a lot of education and building and sort of trying to add the next level to their program, but they're actually experiencing quite a big workload right now. So they actually get quite big opportunities to grow their bodies during the summer because they're not playing as much on the weekends. Conversely, some of the older guys have different focuses right now. We'll have guys hopefully in the Olympic campaign with the Australian and the New Zealand team. They're sort of prepping their body for that. So they've had a little bit of a deload post-season, and now we're starting to ramp them back up to get them ready for hopefully a successful tilt with the Boomers program in July. We've got guys who take contracts overseas. New Zealand, Asia, Europe is quite common for the off-season. For them, they're just going to maintain their body, most of the year, to be honest, because it's quite a seasonal thing, and it can vary quite a lot. So I think at the heart of all that, my favorite thing to do in the off-season is sort of build upon what they've gone through previously, and that's always making sure that, if you're good doing a squat, can you be great? If you're good with your calf, single leg calf raise strength, can you be great? If you do need to, work on injury, it does happen quite a lot. Like, we'll have guys who, for some reason, they might trap bar deadlift, and every time they do it, their back hurts, or every time they do a squat, their knee hurts. The off season's a good chance to sort of figure out why that's happening and break it right down. And can we provide a solution there that's going to have a better long-term outcome? Because in season, you're not always able to do that. And you might sort of go, okay, like if squatting doesn't work for you, just use a leg press, just use a leg extension, and let's keep the load into your body till we get a chance to revisit it. Oftentimes that is the off season, and it's a lot of it with the older guys is revisiting what's worked for their body, what's not, and how we can continually build upon that.
Cool. Then what does in season look like for the NBL? For some of the guys that the top 8. What does a traditional week look like?
So a traditional week could be anywhere from 1 game to 3 games, and it's quite a bit of travel, particularly for us during January is a really busy travel month. So the structure of our league is we'll play from October through to March, or October through to end of Feb for regular season. So in that phase, there's 28 games within 5 months. There's also preseason games and practice games and that sort of stuff. So you're probably looking plus postseason. You're probably looking anywhere between 30 to 40 games between September and March, which is quite a lot. Not a lot as a lot of the other leagues around the world, but still a significant amount of load to factor in. So yeah, quite often we'll look at the game and then build our way back. So the structure we use a floating rest day. So I know a lot of teams and around different sports, they say, okay, Wednesday's your off day, Tuesday's your off day, whatever it may be. We utilize a floating rest day, which in an ideal world, if we're playing one game a week, our days off will usually be the day after a game and then 3 days prior. And that allows us to get some lifts in 2 to 3 to 4 times a week, as well as 2 or 3 on-court sessions plus a game. In a particularly busy week, and this is what happens in the postseason, the playoffs, where basically we'll train in the morning, we'll travel in the afternoon, we'll play the next day, we'll fly home the day after, then we'll train, and then we'll play the next day again. And, you're sort of looking at that game. You can have 2 games in 4 days. You can have 3 games in 6-7 days, and that can get quite hectic. And during that time, I don't really prescribe to this notion of the minimal effective dose. I think it's the right dose for the right occasion, and sometimes that's not the minimal amount. But during that time, it's okay, what are our priorities? What are our big rocks? And to keep that really simple, it's really healthy ankles, healthy knees, healthy hips, healthy shoulders, and prioritize the joints quite heavily. And then it's okay, what do we need to add upon that? Do we need to add some power work? Do we need to add some mobility work? Do we need to add some Pilates, yoga, just to sort of keep the body, strong, being quite a global term, and then we can sort of build outwards from there.
Cool. Then how do you go about, so you mentioned about lift training, but how do you go about, I see a lot of strength coaches in the US, they'll implement some sort of lifting, the day of their games. Do you do anything like that as well, where you kind of do a light lift in the morning, then you play in the evenings or anything like that, like a potentiation session or a primer?
Generally speaking, a lot of guys like to do it the day before. A very small select group of guys will do something the day of, but probably what's more common for us on the day of is actually more tendon and sort of health work. So what we'll generally find, the things that sort of prevent our guys from hitting the court at full steam, will be a lot of calf tightness or calf soreness, a lot of sort of patellar tendinopathy, so your sort of jumper's knee type thing. Sometimes it's tight hips and all those sorts of things from the traveling. So traditionally game day is not really any lifts involved. Some guys, when we're on the road in the hotels, they like to get out of the hotel room, and we'll go find the hotel gym, and it might be simple, some iso leg extensions, some calf raises, a couple of dumbbell lateral raises to get the body moving, and that can really be the crux of a program on a game day. There's not really too much going on. I'd say more often than not, there's no real game day lifts. Day before, 24 hours out, I'd say probably 6 to 7, so probably half the squad like to get a lift in, and that's where it's a bit more specific to the individual. So if we anticipate someone's going to play reasonable minutes the next day, keep it really simple: sprints, jumps, throws, and variations of, as well as some tendon prep is usually the way we go. That could be anything from med ball tosses, clean pulls, box jumps, some A-frame step-ups, whatever we need to do to get a little bit of a pop in their body, combined with, some really slow, structured isometric calf, knee, hip sort of work to make sure their body's got quite a good look. Some of the younger guys, they can actually get a full lift in. The 18, 19-year-olds, they'll get a full lift in the day before a game because they recover quite well with their age, being quite young, but a lot of the time they won't suit up. And if we don't get a good lift in, it's 24 hours before the game, it can be often a missed opportunity that, if we have the day of the game and the day off the next day, they might go 3 or 4 days in a row without a lift. And if we don't lift the day before a game, it can be a missed opportunity to not get some development into them.
Awesome. Then, what are some key takeaways? Obviously, you've been in the professional setting for quite a while now. You can call upon your experiences in the AFL and college level now with Melbourne United. What are some key takeaways for some emerging basketballers? They're 13, 12, 13, 14. they're in, playing some rep basketball. What are some key things that you've seen from the kids that have made it that would be beneficial for those who are coming through the system?
Yeah, it's probably a biased point of view, but I know a lot of coaches do share it. But the gap and the jump between elite juniors and elite NBL professional men, it's probably at least 50% physical, maybe even more, because there's so much talent in the youths coming through that on speed, on quickness, on talent alone, there's some 18-year-olds that can really go and they can really compete against each other. And what you'll see, especially in the junior ranks, is a lot of times skill will win the game. And I still believe fundamentally it's a skill-based sport. Don't get me wrong. You got to put the ball in the hole and you got to stop the other team doing it. But what inhibits and what prevents a lot of people taking that next step is the physicality does ramp up quite quickly. You might be playing against guards when you're 18 years old. The opposing guard might only be 75 kilos. You get to the NBL and our guards are incredibly strong. We've got guards who are 90 plus kilos, and you've got to go in to compete with them straight away. If you're a young big, young guys, we sort of always talk about how, young big guys take a long time to develop. To see meaningful time on the court, you've got to be able to hold your own, because you come into the league and everyone's trying to get theirs and everyone's trying to win. It's a super competitive league. And if you don't have the ability to compete physically, that can be exploited very, very readily and very easily by the opposition. So prioritizing physical development in a structured, progressive way from a very early age, I think, is really, really important. And it doesn't necessarily have to be anything too fancy, but it does need to be regular. It does need to be progressive, and it does need to be mindful that it does facilitate such more on-court development, because the stronger you are and the healthier you are, the more you can get out there and compete, the greater chance you have of success once you get out there. And we see it all the time that, guys might come into a basketball program at 18, 19 years old, and the first 2 or 3 years is just getting their body to the level where they can actually compete physically on the court, because everyone wants to compete for the minutes in any given game. There's, we play 40-minute games. There's 4 quarters and there's 5 guys on the court. So, there's 200 minutes available to play. If you've got 3, 4, 5 guys playing 30 minutes a night, there's not a lot of minutes left for other guys to jump in and play. So what actually allows you to get in there and do that is obviously, number one, a high level of skill, but you need to be able to get out there and compete physically, because it is quite a physical sport.
Yeah, because that's probably what we're seeing at the moment. And obviously Australian culture is focus on the skill, they want to try and specialize in their sport. It's funny you mentioned that. I just did a podcast last week or the week before with the director of strength and conditioning at Wisconsin. Yeah. He said exactly the same thing when it came to his women's volleyball team. Was like, you can specialize and be super skillful at your sport, but if you don't have the strength and power to back it up, when you enter those higher ranks, you're going to get bodied. You're going to get, I know volleyball is a non-contact sport, but you're just not going to be able to keep up with the strength and power and the pace of the game.
For sure. And I think there's definitely an element of, there's exceptions to the rule. And I think sometimes people look at the exception and go, well, it can get done, and it certainly can. There has been historically, and there will be in the future, guys who are not excellent in the weight room, and guys that just get by and girls, for the example, in the women's game, they'll just get by on skill alone because they are such a high level of skill. But what I've always liked to say to people I work with, both athletes and coaches, is, if you look at it almost like a poker match, you could get pocket aces, which would be like a really strong, robust, skillful athlete, and they might not make the next jump. Conversely, you might get someone who's like a 2-7 offsuit, which is not a great poker hand, and they're sort of guys who, don't have a great diet, they don't stretch, they don't recover, they don't do all the right things, but they're so skilled they still make it to the top level in the NBA, and that's always going to happen. But for me, I like to sort of play the odds and go, well, the best odds of me winning in poker is pocket aces. So how can I give my guys pocket aces? And pocket aces for me is, it's a great strength program. It's a really great nutrition program. It's a great education around nutrition, recovery, game day preparation. That's me arming my athletes with pocket aces and say, hey, it doesn't always work out. You might get injured, you might not get selected. Something might go wrong. You might get beat by someone who doesn't even spend a second in the gym. But I don't want to leave that up to chance. If that does occur, then that's fine. It's something we can't really look back and go, we did. If we look back and go, we did everything right. That's all we can do. So I think one of the biggest fallacies with basketball is it's a non-contact sport because it's super physical. There's a lot of contact, and whilst that contact might not be tackling and bumping in a traditional contact sport sense, it's an absolute fallacy to say it's non-contact, because you're trying to box out guys that are 7 foot tall and 120 kilos, and you're trying to push through screens of guards that are super quick and nimble, and you're trying to create separation from your defender to get a shot away. There's so many elements of post up play. You're trying to keep the big from backing you into the post and trying to keep them out so they can't finish over the top of you. So it is a contact sport, in my opinion, and it's the one that we need to prepare athletes for physically. And the crux of that comes from a really, really simple strength training program, and just add the complexities to it based on the individual's needs.
Yeah, I use a similar analogy. It's about stacking the odds in your favor. So everything you do that's in alignment with, achieving your goal specifically will increase your likelihood of achieving it specifically that you want. It's not a guarantee, obviously, but you increase the likelihood, and you're not leaving anything on the table in that case to achieve what that may be, whether it's, to play more minutes or to move up from NBL 1 to NBL or play overseas. You're doing everything in your own control in order to achieve that. And obviously, some of these guys in the NBA, like NBL, NBA, like they're strong dudes, like they're solid, like they can move some tin around. Like I remember saw a video, like I know Shaq's an anomaly, but he can bench 140 kilos with relative ease, and he was obviously the most dominant big man of his time. So it really does show that strength is a real powerful factor, and it's getting generally stronger. I think it's for guys and girls as well. As just like it's across the board in the sport of basketball. Is yes, skill is important. It's going to get you to a certain point, but when you start playing adults, and then your skill, the acquisition of skill will hit a ceiling effect essentially. But there's a deficit in your strength in order to execute your skills well. So it actually will bring you down compared to everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we spoke about, we really need to clearly define what strength is, because it's not, it doesn't have to be the biggest person out there. It doesn't need to be the most muscular person out there, but strength is your ability to, obviously hold your own position, but also impact other people's ability to hold theirs. And if you can find a way to leverage that based on your individual body type, then that's going to be obviously paramount and pretty pivotal towards success. And strength, it is multiple things. It's, you're only as strong as your weakest link in your chain. You might be a super strong guy with weak ankles. Well, that can be a problem. You might be a guy that's got super strong calves but a bad shoulder. So working through the body quite holistically, and really exploring the sort of intricacies of what makes each athlete tick and what makes them be successful, then allows you to build a program based off the back of that. There's certain constants a lot of all the programs. Like for us, we do a lot of work with knee extension and sort of yielding loads in the knee. So like sort of either isometric sort of yielding loads or overcoming loads. They're really important, both of them. But also same with calves. Like, if our guys have got a high load of jumps, we've measured through our catapult system, there could be 400, 500, 600 jumps in a training session. So that means it's 400, 500, 600 landings, and that's okay. That's a combination of double leg, single leg, on your toes, on your heels, different planes of motion. So we really need to make sure we look at strength, not just in a sagittal plane of how much you can lift. It's like how robust can we build your body, and that's one thing that I really drive with our guys.
Cool. So thanks for your time, Jay. I really appreciate it. I think we've covered a lot in a very short period of time. All the best for the season, mate, and hopefully it goes well. You go one better this season compared to last time, but we won't touch on that.
No, look, that's okay, mate. Look, it was a heck of a season. As much as we obviously want to win, we need to find other ways to judge the success of our program. And sometimes it is the physical development of some of our young players are real highlights for me in the last 12 months as well, and also prepping guys for the NBA. So I probably hate losing equally as much as I love winning. Like I'm super competitive, but to your point, there's always goals you can work towards and the things you can control. And your weight room, your physical preparation is one of the things you can control, and we don't always have control of the outcome. So confident we'll go one better next year, and looking forward to get cracking in. I'm sitting around right now wishing the season was starting next week. So
Easy. All right. All the best for the season, Jay, and I'll talk to you soon.
No problem. Appreciate your time, Trent. Thank you.
You have just listened to the Inner Athlete podcast. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date with the release of weekly episodes. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram to get great tips on all things youth athlete development and youth mentoring.